Hello and welcome to the first episode in this new Chess Questions series, in which I answer questions by chess players like you. And it can be anything on your mind. Any viewers or subscribers that have chess questions, submit them in a comment, and I'll try and pick the best questions and do a video with your answer. So this first question for this first episode is basically when do you know when to quit a game or resign? So I had a player that was still a beginner, and they were asking, well, how do I know when I should just give up or quit? Well, some people would say, never give up, just play to the end. And that kind of depends on, what you're trying to do. If you're a beginner, you definitely may want to just play all the way to the end, because it could be a learning experience, especially if you're playing an experienced opponent. You can kind of see and learn from them, how they finish the game out and go for the checkmate. And also, if you're playing an even player, even with you, and you're both beginners especially, you may want to just keep playing, because you never know when you could save the game and get a draw or even a win. So I'm going to play through a game that I recently played at the local chess club. And let's see here. This game starts off, I have the white pieces, and I'm playing against Jeff. And I begin with e4, and he plays e6, the French defense. So, we continue like normal, d4, taking control of the center, because my opponent has, left that option open to me because he's not immediately fighting for the center. So now, the reason that you play e6 is to be able to play d5 and attack this pawn on e4. So I protect it with the knight. Now you can move to c3, but I move here. That way I'm not blocking this c pawn, because now he attacks this d pawn, and the c pawn can push forward and protect. But in this game, it may have been better to play knight at g to f3, developing a piece and protecting that way, because in the game my opponent captures and then I recapture. Now the computer says the best move is to go ahead and capture. My opponent, he played bishop to b4, pinning this knight to my king, but the best move would have been to go ahead and capture this pawn. And then after I recapture, now I'm left with an isolated pawn, which can be a long-term weakness. So getting back to the question of, when should I give up? How long should I play a game? Well, if you're playing a much higher rated opponent and he's ahead by a lot of material, but you just keep playing and he's wondering, well, why isn't my lower rated opponent resigning already? Well, if you want to play to the end till he checkmates you, you can always apologize later and say, hey, I just wanted to play all the way till you checkmated me, just to learn from your experience and see how you did it, how you were able to checkmate me, and use that as a learning tool. So it's up to you. You might watch grandmaster games where they quit, before there's a checkmate and there's still a lot of pieces on the board, and they agree to a draw, or one of them even resigns, and you're like, what is going on here? The game's not even over. Well, they're at such a high level that they can kind of see how the game would play out, and they're so even most of the time in their playing ability. They're both at such a high level that they don't make too many mistakes. So a lot of times, instead of dragging the game out, they'll just go ahead and agree to a draw, or one of them will resign. All right, so back to the game. This is what could have happened. I could have been left with this isolated pawn. But in the game, my opponent develops this bishop here, which the computer says is an inaccuracy, pinning my knight. So I go ahead to avoid this isolated pawn. I push forward in the center, and the computer says that's best. So I gain space, and I also prevent his knight from jumping to this nice f6 square. So he just develops the other knight. And now here, the game was still in the beginning stages. And we were kind of talking in the chess club, and I wasn't paying attention. So I made some bad moves. And then after that, I thought, well, I better focus because now I'm behind, as you'll see what happens here. So I'm thinking, well, I want to fortify this e-pawn and play f4. And so thinking about that and not focusing, I should have asked myself, well, what did my opponent's last move do? Knight to c6, and I would have thought, oh, it attacks my d4 pawn, which is unprotected, and I probably would have moved my knight out, either to knight to f3, or even a3 to attack this bishop, forcing it to make a decision. And then, anyway, I may have moved out to protect this pawn, or even developed another piece or attacked his bishop. But in the game, I make a blunder here, fortifying my center but leaving this pawn unprotected. So, of course, Jeff does the right thing here. He picks the best move and he knocks off this pawn. So now he's ahead here by about one pawn's worth of material, and the game continues with another mistake. So one piece of advice when you make a mistake, you want to slow down and take a look at things, because you're more likely to make a second mistake after your first one if you rush and don't slow things down and reassess the situation in the game. So I follow up my blunder with a mistake here, thinking, oh, I'll check him and pick off this bishop. But, he could have just retreated here with this knight, protect the bishop. Then maybe I could have tried to pin the knight with my bishop and keep the pressure up. But one other thing I need to be aware of is, okay, so he plays a good move here. Let's see. Well, first of all, what should I have played? Instead of queen to a4, computer recommends bishop to d3, just developing the bishop, and then they could retreat back and fortify this knight, although now the computer's saying to develop the other knight. So in the game, we had queen to a4, and Jeff plays a great move here. Bishop to d7, so that blocks the attack on the king. And you might be thinking, well, now the queen can just pick off this bishop. Well, no, I can't do that. And so in the game, I realized, wait a minute, I can't pick off this bishop, because then he could just jump his knight in here, forking my queen, which would have captured the bishop on b4, and my king. So I was like, this game is turning into a mess. So I had to retreat back, and the computer says that's the best move, to just retreat all the way back to d1. So it's not looking good. Now my opponent is ahead by what here? 3.66. So he's got 3 pieces developed, and I only have 1 developed, and he's ahead a pawn. So this is where more of that question comes into play. When should you give up? Well, if there's still a lot of pieces on the board and it's early in the game, you definitely should not resign and give up. Even though it's looking pretty bad, I decide to hang in there. And so my opponent plays bishop, captures the knight on d2 with check, giving up his bishop pair. So this is a mistake. black is still ahead after this by 1.16, but that's a far cry from being ahead 3.66 here if he would have played queen to b6. So this just kind of helped me. It gets rid of one of his pieces. It helps me develop one of mine. It gets rid of his bishop pair. So, what should he have played? It looks like queen to b6, just developing another piece. So now he would be ahead 4 pieces in development to my 1, and this would just be awful. So, and my king is stuck in the center. He's about ready to go ahead and castle to the queen side, or he can just develop another piece, this knight, and castle on the king side. So it's just looking really bad. So if queen to b6 was played, it looks like I should play knight to f3. If he captures, well then, oh, see, that's another tough choice. My knight can't recapture because the bishop is pinning it. Also, now the computer's saying a3 might be a good move, forcing this bishop to make a decision. So, in the game, let's see what actually happened. Let's see. I retreat the queen. Jeff captures my knight. So, this allows me to recapture with my bishop, which is the best move. So now I've developed my bishop, but still I only have 1 piece developed. But now Jeff only has 2 pieces developed, whereas before he had 3 developed. So now the game continues with knight to f5. So Jeff retreats, afraid of a discovered attack. If my bishop moves, at some point his knight could come under attack. But it looks like the best move is just queen to b6. Once again, developing the queen, which protects the knight, and it also attacks this unprotected pawn. So in the game, Jeff retreats his knight. And now this gives me an opportunity to develop my knight. So now we're kind of even in development. We both have 2 pieces developed. But now we have this. The other knight is developed, fortifying the first knight. But this is a mistake. It looks like the best move at this point would be... let's see. Well, the computer's saying to move this knight to h6. Which doesn't look too great here on the edge of the board, but it leaves an escape route for this knight if this pawn is pushed attacking the knight. So we'll see what happened in the game. So it looks like the computer recommends moving the knight on g to h6, or let's see, d4 even, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I guess with d4, the knight is protecting it, and then maybe you could threaten to jump your knight down into e3 at some point, attacking the queen and the bishop, trying to get rid of the bishop pair. But anyway, let's see what happened in the game. We have this move, which is a mistake, because it limits the options on where this knight can go if it has to retreat. So it looks like I should have immediately played g4, attacking this knight. But in the game, I wanted to develop another piece and get ready to possibly castle if I can. But it looks like immediately attacking here and sending the knight back to this awful square on the corner, the edge of the board. And then the recommendation is either rook to g1, or it looks like the top recommendation is just to play that, fortifying this pawn. And so what do we have next here? So in the game, we get to this point. I developed my bishop, but I should have pushed my pawn forward. And now my opponent castles, which is a miss. Better would have been d4, which possibly allows the knight to jump forward and attack the queen and this pawn. You would probably have to give up your bishop pair. So instead, my opponent castles. But now, finally, I find the g4 move. Or, I saw it earlier, but I thought I should develop more before I tried to play that move. But the computer says I should have immediately attacked with g4. So I push forward with g4. Now the computer says that's a great move because it forces my opponent to retreat. So this is the best move, the only place to retreat back. But this knight is on an awful square here. And now white has the lead. So it looks like h3 is what the computer wants. But instead, I play this move, knight to g5, putting pressure on this h-pawn, trying to provoke some weaknesses on the king side. But let's see what the best move is here. Computer recommends just h3, fortifying this pawn and leaving that knight stuck on that pretty bad square there. So let's take a look at things. At this point, it just recommends king to h8, so then the knight could retreat back to the back rank and then maybe jump forward in the future. So in the game, I move my knight forward, piling up on this h-pawn with my bishop and my knight, trying to get some attack going. And my opponent responds with g6. And this is a mistake. And white's lead jumps to plus 1.77 after this. So instead, the computer recommends, let's see. Well, now it's saying queen to b6 is the top move. But this was a recommendation as well. And now it's saying that is the best move, blocking the attack on the pawn. So now the best thing to do is just play h4 and try and get some attack going. And then the computer recommends, let's see, well, it's throwing out different things. It looks like this was one of the recommendations, and now it's saying that's the best. And here, capturing en passant is the second best move. It looks like capturing with the g-pawn is even better. This opens a half-open file directly on the king, that maybe the rook can move over here and use that. And now the computer recommends capturing with the rook, which is interesting. You would think that, well, if the knight captures, or excuse me, if the knight jumps in there, I don't know, we could take a look at that. That's the third best move. It looks like capturing with the rook is best, which is what the computer showed me in the review here that I did, which I'll show you. So it says this would be a brilliant move here. And then you would, of course, capture with your bishop. Now the knight would jump up here, but this bishop aimed at the king side is gone now. And both knights are attacking this pawn. So the queen should jump up here, threatening an attack. And now the knight should retreat and block. And then it looks like the game could continue like this. Trade off some pawns. Now the queen's under attack, so the queen would retreat. And the knights jump forward. So this is a possibility of how the game could have gone. But back to what actually happened. I pile up on this h7 pawn. My opponent pushes forward here, so we've created some dark squared weaknesses around the king. And I continue with this move, pushing the h-pawn, threatening to push forward and try and break open things and have this rook activated. So f5 is played, and here it looks like the best move is capturing en passant, and then the rook recaptures. And now I didn't play the best move. So in the game, I thought about capturing here with the knight immediately, and that's what's recommended. So here's the best move according to the computer. Capturing here, and if the king captures, now you can push forward and fork the rook and the knight. So it looks like this would have been the best path forward. And then the rook retreats, and now, oh, actually it's showing that that is a blunder. So, what should we have done? Let's see. Knight at E to F5. Huh. So now it's saying that that is the best move. Let's see if the computer agrees. Well, it looks like the computer is having trouble figuring out what is best here. So earlier, when I did a quick game review, it says retreat, then do not capture the knight, just break open the H file on the king, giving the knight time to move. But now you capture like this, attacking the king. The king would capture the pawn, and let's see, how do we continue? Attacking with the queen, checking here. The king would have to move here, and it's not looking too good. So now we have, let's see, bishop captures, knocking out a defender. Rook captures, and now queen to h6. So this is interesting. The king is kind of running out of room here. It looks like this would be best, but now if we check again, the king moves where to f8, but we have queen to h8. But you get the picture. The king would be under attack here, and it's looking pretty bad for this king. If he's not careful, there's a mate in 2. It looks like that would be the best thing to do. And now we have this check, and it's just looking pretty bad for black if the game would have gone in this direction. So in the game, I actually just pushed this pawn, which is a mistake. White is still ahead, but the advantage is not as big anymore. So now my opponent responds with a blunder. Knight to f7, trying to knock out this attacking knight. But let's see what would have been best here. It looks like e5 would have been the best move according to the computer. So white is still in the lead here. But my king is stuck in the center, so maybe there could be counter-attacking opportunities. It looks like at this point, I should just capture the pawn. Now we're piling up on this pawn. And the knight's under attack. So it looks like capturing like this. Although now the computer's saying that's a mistake. So let's see what they recommend. Queen to b6. Moving that way. Once again, the computer is undecided. So let's take a look at what happened in the game. We have h5 being played, and now my opponent blunders with knight to f7 here. So, what do I do now? Well, in the game, I decide, well, I might as well just start attacking, and maybe the game will get crazy, but it should be fun. So, at this point, I play the knight sacrifice, which the computer loves. and says that this is a brilliant move. So now, if my opponent captures with the king, which is, it looks like that's the best move to play, although in the game, knight to c6 was played instead. Because this knight is attacking the rook, so knight to c6 was played. So if I take the rook, the queen can recapture. But it looks like the best continuation is to actually attack, or capture with the king. And then here, let's see, I thought capturing here with a discovered check would be best, but it looks like g5 is even better. So we could go ahead and take a look at that. That attacks the trapped rook. Where can this rook go? Here maybe. Although the knight could sacrifice itself to save this rook, but it's looking bad here. The king is about to come under a lot of pressure. So here it looks like just king to g8 is best. And then we would just go ahead and capture the rook. But, this looks pretty bad. Okay, so in the game, we have, sacrificed our knight, but my opponent refuses the sacrifice. Instead, he develops a knight and protects his rook. So the best thing here, third best, is to just go ahead and capture this rook, which is what I did in the game. But it looks like, once again, g5 would be the best move. Even h takes g6 would be good. All right, so in the game, let's see. I capture like this, but it wants this move. Capturing, opening the h file, protecting the knight. The rook is still under attack. Here it looks like knight at f to e5 is the best option. So I don't know. It's bad when all your options don't look too good. So let's see here. In the game, I capture the rook, which is an inaccuracy. My opponent captures with the queen, which is best. And at this point, I'm ahead about 3.53. So I decide to break open the king side, try to get an attack going against the king, and now my rook is involved. We have knight to h8, which kind of surprised me. The computer says this is an inaccuracy, but it looks like knight at f to e5 would be better, which, I don't know, that looks pretty rough as well. Knight to e5 would just let you pick that off with the knight. The other knight could capture and then attack your bishop, but still, I don't know. That's not the greatest looking option. Okay, back to the game. We had knight to h8, but it looks like, I don't know, that's what the computer says is best. And then, of course, we should just go ahead and capture that knight. They would capture with their knight attacking our bishop. And now the best thing to do is to just pin that knight to the queen. Yeah, this doesn't, this looks pretty bad. And now it's +8 for white if that line would have happened. So back to the game. My opponent retreats his knight here. And I get why this was done. Now the knight and the queen are piling up on this pawn here that is only protected by the bishop. So I continue with g5, which the computer says is best, attacking the queen. And it looks like the best move is to go ahead and capture this pawn, which is kind of what I was expecting my opponent to do. And then I thought, well, if he does that, I could just move my rook over, attacking his queen. If he picks off the other pawn, I could go ahead and pick off this. this pawn and get a rook up here on the 7th rank attacking his bishop. But my opponent decides to play queen to g7. And computer says this is still good. And I play rook to h7. Although now the computer prefers bishop to c3, lining up on the queen. And I kind of thought about that in the game, but it looks like, this pawn could just move to d4, attacking my bishop. And then what do? Do I just retreat back? So that's why I didn't play that move. But I jumped my rook up here on the 7th rank, attacking the queen and waiting to see what my opponent will do about that. So he responds with queen to d4, although now the computer is saying it's better to capture that pawn. But here, he's threatening to attack my king with a check and start chasing my king around. So I thought for quite a bit here, and I wasn't sure what the best way to proceed would be. It looks like I should have immediately played queen to h5. So I just played bishop to c3, attacking his queen, letting his queen jump down here and start chasing my king. But it looks like an immediate queen to h5 would have been best, because then you have knight to b4. If that is played, which the computer says is best, you can ignore that and just capture here. And now, if the opponent runs, well, then we would have, let's see here, queen to h7. So the king can only go to g7. It would be a mate in one if the king runs here. So at this point, the only thing to do is to just give up the queen. And then, well, I guess that doesn't give up the queen. It just takes the rook. So what do we say is best here? Checking. The queen would capture. But now your pawn captures, and this passed pawn is right on the edge here. And you can't move in here to block it because of this bishop to c3. So the king would have to move here, but now it's looking pretty bad. You can pick off the knight. You could play bishop to c3 with a check. And then, this pawn is probably going to end up promoting. The rook can capture. So in the game, let's see what actually happened. After queen to d4, I attack the queen. So now we have this check. I move my king up, another check. Here I just block with the queen, but now we have a capture of the pawn with check. My king moves over. It looks like it would have been better to go down to here. The pawn jumps forward, and I decide to sacrifice my rook for the knight up in the corner. And the computer says this is a brilliant move. So the best thing to do is for the king to capture. But now we have queen to h5 check. King moves and check again. But it looks like it would have been better to check from here and keep this pawn protected. Anyway, the king runs. And it looks like the best thing to do here would have been to activate my other rook, bringing it over here to h1. But I played the third best move. Now the computer's saying this is the best move. I check with the pawn. So the king moves up to the best square here, king to e7. And now I play g8. Promoting, and it's a discovered check on the king. So the king runs to the best square here on d6, And now it looks like I should have immediately just picked off this rook. And let's see, did I do that? No, I check first, then the king runs, and now I pick that off. So the only problem with this, and I wasn't sure if I should do it or not, but now the computer's saying that was best, is I'm going to start getting chased around here. And it looks like the best thing to do is stay on this back rank. And if I get checked and he picks off this rook, well, now his queen is in the corner and I'm just up this extra queen. So I start getting chased here. Queen to b6. I move my king over. Another check. So I have to move back. See, I have to be careful because there's a mate in 4 and a mate in 2. I have to be careful my king doesn't get trapped over here. So I move back. The queen checks again. So now I thought, well, I better not get trapped up here because of this knight and bishop working with the queen. So the checks continue, and my king is getting chased all around. And it looks like I should have gone here to d1 anyway. So we have a check, and I block. And now the queen checks again, but it would have been better to go there. And that's what I kind of saw in the game. I thought that he should probably check down here. So what do I do then? I would have to go king to c2. And then if he checked me up here, what do I do there? It looks like I would be able to escape because I could go king to b1. And now if he jumps down here to check me, I can block with my bishop, which is kind of what happened in the game. So let's finish this out. We play here, queen to c5, check. The king moves over, check. And finally, I block with the bishop. So now we have this move, attacking my bishop here. And I capture. But my opponent plays this move. Trying to keep an eye on this diagonal. And let's see if that was best. Well, obviously the computer says there's something better. The best thing here is to just immediately capture this bishop, it looks like. But he moves here. And now it looks like I should just retreat. But I thought, well, I'll try and trade material. So I played the second best move. And my opponent played the best move here. I wasn't sure. Well, now the computer is changing its mind. It said it's better to play queen to e2 and keep this queen because that's his only chance to put up some bigger resistance is keeping that queen on the board. So he captures, I capture, my bishop is captured, and now I check. So here, I'm just ahead material. It says there's a mate in 8 already. My opponent runs, and I play f7, getting ready to promote this pawn to another queen. So we start running our pawns. I capture this one with check. The computer says I should have just immediately promoted. The king runs, and it looks like this is the best move, just immediately grabbing another queen. And here b6 is recommended, blocking the scope of my bishop. And instead this was played, developing this bishop. But, with 2 queens, it's tough here. So I just start attacking and we have a mate. So this is how the game ended. Now, the original question in this video was, well, when should I give up? Well, I would say if you're a beginner player, even intermediate, you probably want to just play as long as you can, especially if you're playing other beginners or intermediates, because you never know when your opponent could make a mistake. If you put up stiff resistance and they're thinking, why hasn't he resigned already? Well, you could just keep playing and putting up resistance, and they might slip up and make a mistake, and you can get a draw or even come back and win the game. So, that's a tough decision, but I would say definitely beginners, intermediates, try and hang in there, play to the end. It's a good learning experience, whether you're winning or losing. But definitely if you're losing a game, hang in there. You might be able to come back and pull the game out. All right. Well, in the review, let's see here. It looked like my opponent played at 74.6% accuracy, so that's not bad. And it looks like I played at 86.1. I didn't think I was, at that. I thought I was a little bit lower than that because I had a blunder, a miss, some mistakes, and inaccuracies. And my opponent, played pretty good. They only had 2 inaccuracies and 3 mistakes and 1 miss and only 1 blunder. But, I had a blunder as well. And they had a great move as well. All right. Well, just as a reminder, send in those questions, any chess-related questions that you would like answered, and I'll pick the best questions that I receive before I do the second video in this chess question series, and I'll answer the best question that I receive, and hopefully we'll get some interesting questions out there. Well, thank you for watching. If you found value in this video, please like and subscribe to support the channel. And feel free to leave those comments with your questions, or any comments in general. And if you have any requests as well, you can send those in. So thank you for watching and have a super chess day.